Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be discussing the return on investment bands, or ROI bands. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Now, I know most of us are not watching the crypto charts right now because we are just so enthused with the candidates tournament, that is the chess tournament. But you guys already knew that, I'm sure. But it is useful to come back to the Cryptoverse and look at some of these charts. Now, this is arguably one of the more convoluted charts I show. It's probably one of the most misunderstood charts I show. And I think the reason it's misunderstood is probably, frankly, because I just don't do a good job of explaining it. So I'm going to try to do a better job of explaining it in this video. You have the price of Bitcoin on the y-axis, on the primary y-axis, and that corresponds to the blue line. You'll recognize that, of course, as the price of Bitcoin, and you can see where it lines up over here, right? These lines correspond to the primary y-axis, whereas the secondary y-axis over here is ROI days. Now, what is ROI days? Well, the way I've defined it here is just it's the amount of time it takes to see that return if you bought Bitcoin on that day. So if we were to say, how long historically does it take to 2x your Bitcoin investment? Well, of course, it depends on what day you buy it. So let's suppose you were curious and you said, well, what happens if you bought Bitcoin at a 2013 peak, right? You came in at the 2013 peak and you bought Bitcoin at around $1.13 thousand. You just go to where the dot shows up for that 2x ROI and you hover over it, and you can see that it looks like it was around 1,260 days. Meaning in 2013, had you bought at around the top, it would have taken you a few years to 2x your investment. However, let's suppose that you bought at the bottom, right, rather than the top. Then you just simply go to where the dot shows up, and you can see that it would have only taken you about 300 days to 2x your investment. On the other hand, when you get to mania phases like 2013, on the way up, you can see there's not a dot above it because it only took a very short period of time to 2x your investment. So you go to this level, you go to where, say, the line is that crosses that data point, you go down, and you can see that at this point, it would have only taken you about 30 days to 2x your investment. What this shows is that, during every mania phase, you can sort of see this very rapid move to the downside by the amount of time it takes to 2x your investment. And you can see something similar again happened over here, where we got to the point where it only took about later on in the summer, it took about 87 days to 2x your investment had you bought in the summer of 2021. But if you were buying over here in, say, late 2020, at one point, it only took 23 days, in fact, to 2x your investment. One of the things that's interesting is from one cycle to another, the amount of time it takes to 2x your investment, the quickest you can do it during the mania phase tends to get longer. So for instance, during these first few cycles, you could, or the first cycle or so, you could 2x your investment just within a couple days. By the next cycle, it took maybe about a week at the peaks. The next cycle, it took about 12 days at the peak. And then, of course, over here, it lines up more so with the 42K peak. And you can see that it took about the 42K local top, and it took about 23 days to 2x your investment had you got in just before that move, right? Unfortunately, if you bought at the top, right, if you actually bought at 42K, if I can actually scroll in over here, if you actually bought at 42K, there's not a dot that corresponds with that price because, of course, we have not gone to 84K yet. So had you bought at 42K, unfortunately, there's no way, just by buying spot Bitcoin that you would have 2x'd your investment. Now, it's interesting in the sense that you can also sort of see these things are sloping. They're getting flatter, right? Simply put, as time goes on. So over here, they're relatively they have a steep angle of attack to the downside, and then as you continue on through from one market cycle to another, you can see they do become a bit flatter. So perhaps during the next mania phase, whenever it occurs, you would assume that if the amount of time to 2x your investment for Bitcoin, if it gets to between, say, 30, 40, 50 days or something like that, you could be getting very, very close to the top, right? I mean, that would be if history is in fact any indication. Now, we can also look at some other time frames because, a 2x on your investment is nice. But what about a 4x? right? What about a 4x? You can see a very similar trend. Slope is very steep early on through each of these 4x ROI bands, but as time goes on, they tend to get a bit flatter. And the amount of time to 4x your investment near the peak tends to take a bit longer. So for instance, in this one, it took about 12 days. In the next cycle, it took closer to 20 days or so at the peaks. In the next one, it took 60 days. And then in this one here, it took about a little over 100 days. So perhaps at the next cycle peak, the time to 4x your investment, if you see it get down to say 130 days, 140 days or something like that, we could in fact be looking at a cycle peak for Bitcoin. All right. And you'll notice that, eventually we'll see these bands pick up again, but of course it's going to take some time. The price of Bitcoin right now is trading for just above $20,000. So to 4x your Bitcoin or your Bitcoin portfolio from where we currently stand, of course, we need to go to $80,000, which does seem doable eventually, right? Probably not going to happen, this month or this year, but I do imagine that a lot of people that watch this channel would envision Bitcoin eventually making it to $80,000, and then that'll lead to the next 4x ROI band. All right. Now, I'm not going to show all of these, but we can go look at, say, the 10x ROI band, and you'll see very similar patterns. Even if you look at, say, a 20x. What's interesting is even last cycle, you could have seen a 20x on your Bitcoin had you bought near the bottom, and it would have taken about 1,000 days. And if you bought at the very end of 2018, then we know that only 2.5 years later or so, something like that, maybe a little bit more than 2.5, you would have seen, or no, actually right around 2.5, you would have seen a 10 or 20x on your Bitcoin investment, because if you could have bought it at around $3,000, we know Bitcoin went above 60K. Now, a 50x hasn't really been seen in some time. Okay. And really the last time you would have been able to 50x is going all the way back to April of 2017, had you bought Bitcoin then. Now, what's interesting is had you bought Bitcoin then, you would have seen the mania phase. We would have had a whole another bear market, another mania phase. We've come down. You still would not be looking at a 50x, of course. And in order to 50x from this mania phase over here, it would still take quite some time. But eventually, had you bought in say April of 2017 at around $1,400 or so, it was only a matter of time before you eventually saw that 50x. Now, the next likely candidate here is coming in at around $3,000, which is just above where this was. Will we eventually see, at least for this cycle's ROI band, will we see eventually a 50x on Bitcoin having bought at, say, $3,100 in December 2018? Well, probably. it means we need to go to at least 150, 160K, something like that. So yeah, it'll probably happen eventually. But the time to do so will likely continue to increase as you see them continuing to increase. And then finally, if we look at the 100x ROI band, it was possible, in fact, to see a 100x on your Bitcoin as recently as October of 2016, right? If you had bought Bitcoin all the way back at around $600, because again, we know what happened in 2021. We went over 60K. When you show all of these, right? When you show all of these bands, it looks kind of nice, right? Like you see the ROI bands, but I do think it's an interesting way to visualize the price action for Bitcoin and to really show the diminishing returns that we've talked about, right? You can clearly see diminishing returns taking place in the ROI bands, and it certainly takes longer and longer to realize certain types of gains for Bitcoin, just because again we would expect diminishing returns, so therefore it'll take longer to get to those returns that we'd all like to see. I hope you guys I hope you liked this content. If you do, remember to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think about it. Hopefully I did a better job of explaining it this time than I did last time. And if you do have any questions, I'll try to respond to those. Remember, you can check out the Telegram group. We'll leave a link down in the description below for that. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. I'll see you next time. Bye.